with conflict, with arrogance, and even war. How many wars have been fought in the name of God? And each side believing fully that their side, that God is on our side, that we're doing what we're doing for God. And then the other side is saying, and fighting against each other, warring against each other. How many, in modern times, we have been trying to deal with that problem for a while. And we've tried some different ways. One way in which we've tried to deal with it is to basically ban religion. Basically, say, well, let's just do away with it. Let's do away with it all. And we've attempted that in some different ways. You had the Soviet Union for a while. You had communist China, which still represses religion, still tries to do away with that, and mostly in an official form. And other places as well that said, hey, we're just going to push out religion. No religion, because religion is evil. Religion causes conflict. We're just going to get rid of it. Then we found out that these non-religious cultures and nations were, if anything, more oppressive than the religious ones. And so that experiment just didn't pan out very well. Man, we try to ban religion, and yet you end up with regimes that are just as repressive and have much conflict as others. So it seems that the problem isn't simply a religion problem, but a problem that is in the heart of us people. An arrogance, a selfishness, a greed, that whatever belief system we come to, whether it's religious or non-religious, we end up treating people badly. We end up oppressing people. We end up asserting our way at the expense of those around us. So the whole thing of just getting rid of religion, that didn't work out too well. And so what has become more the modern solution to dealing with these conflicts and religion conflicts is what I might call relativism. I'll try to define that here in a minute. But basically we say, look, you're a Hindu, you're a Muslim, you're a Buddhist, you're a Christian, you guys have other things, okay, that's fine, that's great. Believe your religion, practice your religion because it works for you. It works for you. Do that and enjoy it. And just acknowledge that everybody else's belief system is also equally valid and that it works for them. And we'll just do your thing and let them do your thing. I'll believe what I want to believe. You believe what you want to believe. And we'll just respect each other and we'll get along and it'll be good. That's kind of what way we've tried to approach that. And it's really, there's a lot to be said for it. I'll call it relativism, and the definition, the doctrine that knowledge, truth, and morality exist in relation to culture, society, or historical context and are not absolute. Now, I'll put that in a little more everyday language, found this definition. Relativism is the belief that there's no absolute truth, only the truths that a particular individual or culture happen to believe. If you believe in relativism, then you think different people can have different views about what's moral and immoral. And I might add, you can believe that people can have different views and them be equally right, them be equally okay. Your belief works for you, my belief works for me, and we can just all get along. Now, there's a lot to commend for that, because relativism, as it's usually taught in our culture, teaches us to tolerate and accept people of other nations, of other races, of other religions, and to get along with them, live and let live kind of a thing, and it teaches us to educate ourselves about others and try to put ourselves in their shoes, not to be arrogant, but to put ourselves in their shoes and understand what they believe. It also, this doesn't really work out in practice, but in theory, it's supposed to do this. Also helps keep us from being prideful and puffed up and thinking that we're better than other people. This seems like a very decent solution, but it has a few fatal problems. Okay? Relativism, while just seeming like, well, this is the solution. In fact, in our universities, in most of our media, in most of our politics, relativism is seen as the way to save us from ourselves. The way to keep us from destroying ourselves with our wars, our different systems of belief coming into conflict, and us killing each other over religions or non-religions or whatever it may be. Relativism is seen as the savior. But there's some reasons why relativism can't save us, and I'm going to try to explain that here. It turns out that relativism itself is a kind of religion, and when I say a religion is a way of viewing your life and your purpose and what you are to do in this world. Relativism has its own viewpoint. A lot of times, relativists will give this little illustration, and it's just a common illustration. I'm sure you've heard it. Several blind men walk up to an elephant, and one of them grabs a hold of the trunk. Of course, he's blind, he grabs a hold of the trunk of the elephant and says, "Oh, this thing is flexible and long. It's like a snake." And another guy kind of grabs onto one of the legs and says, "Oh, no. It's thick and round. It's like a tree trunk." And somebody else comes up to the sides of it and says, "Oh no, it's flat and solid like a wall." And the different parts. And so, the moral of the story is, they're all right and they're all wrong. Each of them sees a different part of the animal. Not sees literally, but each of them perceives a different part of the animal. And so they just don't see the whole picture. They just see part of it. And so relativists will say that's the way religions are. Each of them sees a part of reality, experiences a part of reality. They just don't see. They're all right. They're all just incomplete, and they see different things in different ways. Here's the deal with that illustration. The person telling the illustration is the only one who sees the whole picture. You get this? The one telling the story is the one who, you guys just see part of the picture, part of the reality. I, however, can actually see the whole thing. You are blind. I can see. I can see that this is the way it is, whereas you just experience part of it. Now, what that ends up doing is, the very same thing that religions do, claiming, I can see, you're blind, and just you don't see all the truth. So relativists, unintentionally, of course, relativists end up doing the very same thing that religions do, and that they claim that their way is right and others don't see clearly. Another issue with it is that relativism kind of cancels itself out. Relativism says, look, say you're a Christian. You're a Christian because you grew up in sort of a Christian culture, maybe a Christian family. You grew up with Christian values being taught around you. You learned about Jesus at an early age, and so yes, of course, you're going to be a Christian. If you'd grown up, in India, you'd be much more likely to be a Hindu, and that would be the way it goes. See, your worldview is just dependent on your circumstance, on your personality, your kind of biological makeup, the people around you, the culture around you, your family, all that. You are a product of your culture, which does say a very important truth. The problem with relativism is that relativism itself is also a belief system that is largely a cultural, biological, historical, circumstantial phenomenon. People who are relativists are in part a product of their culture, just as those who are of different belief systems. So relativism says, look, you guys don't see the big picture. Everybody just sees part of it. But actually, relativists themselves are simply expressing a worldview that comes out of a historical, cultural context, okay? Now, that would be okay. And really, if you were to talk to a thinking relativist, they would say, okay, yeah, that's true. It is true that my worldview is also partially influenced and all that by cultural and circumstances. However, I just think that it's the correct one. And I really sympathize with that. I empathize with that. But where relativism really breaks down is that it doesn't actually work. And this is where the issue comes, is that when you try to truly be a relative, live relativism, it doesn't work in life. I'm going to give you an example. That it's an imperfect example, but it's an example we're all experiencing in some way right now. And don't get mad at me because it involves politics, okay? Because this is not a political deal. This is what I see going on. You can divide America in lots of different ways. You can use different criteria to divide America into different sections. But one of the most common and simplistic and really way oversimplistic way of dividing America is liberal conservative, okay? We got liberal conservative, and it's almost a 50-50 split right now, okay? As you can tell, every presidential election, it's like percentages are tiny. We got liberal and conservative. Now, obviously, that is way oversimplistic, and there's not simply liberal and conservative people. But those are just kind of two general broad categories. And unless you listen to Fox or watch Fox News or listen to talk radio, the majority of our media tends toward the liberal side of things. I think most people would agree with that, except for a few others. But so our media is largely kind of on that liberal sort of viewpoint. Now, a lot, though not all, not nearly all, but a considerable amount of those on the liberal side of things adhere more or less to a form of relativism. Okay, now this does not apply to all liberals itself. Let me just say this right now. I believe, you can get mad at me now if you want to, I believe that you can be a Christian, a Jesus-following Christian, and have a lot of beliefs that would be categorized as liberal. And I believe that you can be a Jesus-following Christian and have a lot of beliefs that could be categorized as conservative. Okay? So that's my and I hope that's true. And the reason I hope that's true is because I do. Okay? Because I don't fit in those categories very well, and I'm sure that you don't either. I'm sure that you have some that are split different ways. Though you might say I'm a liberal or I'm conservative or something like that. There's just overlap. So, having said that, a good number of those in the liberal category would be qualified as a relativists. And that's in our media a lot, and in a lot of our politics. Now, you might know that right now we have a president and administration that is not very orthodox. Okay, it's not normal. It's not politics like we've normally experienced it, and it's just very interesting. Okay, sometimes our administration, our president, will say things or tweet things. Now it's tweet things. Okay, that are pretty controversial and don't have any facts to back them up. Say something and make this statement, and wait a minute, there's no facts. And occasionally say things that can explicitly be disproved very easily, that are simply not true. But we'll double down on it and say it, okay? Now, the reason I bring this up is because I marvel at the response to this happening, okay? The relativist media go ballistic, okay? When our president tweets something or says something, states something that can just be easily disproven, they're like, no, you cannot do that. You have to base your statements on fact. You have to have evidence to prove that what you're saying is true. And the fascinating thing for me about this is that relativists, when they come in contact with other relativists who don't believe the way they believe, they go crazy. It's infuriating. When someone in power is actually living out relativism, relativists don't like it. Okay? Because it doesn't work. I can make up my own truth. I can say what I want to be true, and I can say it enough times where I'll just try to make it true. But the truth is, we need some sort of objective reality. I can't just decide what I want to believe, and you decide what you want to believe, and you decide what you want to believe, and it really work, and us really get along. We're not going to get along that way. It doesn't work. So relativism, though, boy, it promises to bring us together, to help us get along and to solve these problems. Relativism actually doesn't do it. It doesn't work. We can't actually live by relativism. Now, what is our reality? What can be our reality? Because that's our next question. You know, we say, okay, if relativism doesn't really work in real life, what reality do you attach yourself to? How do you decide? How do you figure out what is truly real? Something that is real for everybody, not just your own opinion. How do you determine that? Some turn to science, which science is something that I think every Christian should love, should be fascinated by, because it's simply a study of what creation is. And we're going to be talking about science. Madison is going to be sharing a good bit about science here in a couple of weeks. And it'll be fascinating. It'll be a really cool thing. So some will say, turn to science. And that is good as far as it goes. But science can only tell us so much. Let's talk. I know I'm making a big jump here. But let's talk just a little bit about Christianity. Because, you know, I've told you before, I come from a Christian perspective. That is the worldview that I have, that I've come to have. I've certainly questioned it plenty in my life, but that is the worldview I have. And I recognize that in a relativist culture, as we are in a largely relativist culture, that Christianity is just downright offensive to a lot of people. Now, one of the reasons it's offensive is what we talked about last week. And that is, some who adhere to the Christian faith or say they believe the Christian faith just act in arrogant, unloving, uncaring ways. And it just turns people off. It's just a tragedy that many people are pushed away from Christianity by things that are anti-Christian, by those who wear the Christian name but act in ways that are anti-Christian. And so people who aren't Christians say, no, I don't want a part of that. And I get that. But going deeper, for those who are non-believers and who really are searching for truth, who are looking for it, when they investigate the Christian faith, they find things, not just in people who aren't living up to the Christian faith, they find things that are core to the Christian faith that are very objectionable, that are very difficult, that are off-putting to a relativist culture. And so I want to deal just a little bit with that. People who investigate Christianity find out that Jesus taught that there is absolute truth, that there is a reality. He was not a relativist. He taught that there's a real eternal truth, and that it is the task of humans to discover that truth and to live in that truth. Now that's off-putting enough, okay, for a relativist. But then Jesus went on to say something, to teach something that is absolutely, totally unacceptable in our culture. He not only claimed that there is a truth, that there is an ultimate reality, he claimed he was that truth. Jesus said that truth is God. That truth is not simply a concept. It's not simply a set of beliefs. It's not just an object. Truth is a person. The truth is the God who is and who created all that is. That all that is real comes from Him. That everything answers to Him. That all things that are real are from Him because He is truth. He is reality. Jesus taught that. And as Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, Jesus Himself claimed to not only tell the truth, but to embody the truth. Jesus made this statement found in the Gospel of John. John 14:6, Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That is possibly the most objectionable, just abhorrent statement that Jesus ever made for many in our culture today. Because it is exclusive, just radically exclusive, narrow, and just sounds extremely arrogant. I mean, how do you get more arrogant than to say, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life? I mean, this is completely off-putting to many who investigate the Christian faith. He essentially declared all religions useless except for following, trusting in Him. So, if you're a relativist, you either have to see Jesus as an enemy of the truth, or pretend that He doesn't exist, because He doesn't fit into a relativist culture. This is another thing. If Jesus is not telling the truth here, He is a diabolical liar or totally insane. He is either a nutcase or worse. The general attitude and belief that, hey, Jesus was a good moral teacher. No, he wasn't. No, he's not the only way. He's just one way of many ways. But he was a good moral teacher. Let me tell you, if this is not true, Jesus was not a good moral teacher. He was the devil himself. Because that is absolutely immoral if it is not true. At the same time, that Jesus was very exclusive and taught that He was the only way to God, that there are not many paths to God, that there is one path to God, and that path is through Him. At the same time that He was exclusive like that, He also taught and lived love for the poor, care for the underprivileged, concern for all those who were pushed down in society. Jesus drastically elevated the status of women in culture. And let me tell you, the status of women in the culture in that time was extremely low. He elevated the status of women. When there were people with diseases that everybody would stay away from, Jesus would touch them and He would heal them. He became a friend to the rough and to the outcast of society, as well as those who were highly ranked in society. And like we saw last week, Jesus hated religious hypocrisy. He spoke strongly against religious leaders who taught one thing, but they were using their religious power for their own sense of self-worth, to make themselves puffed up for their status. And Jesus' idea of greatness was humble service. And He lived that. He lived as, at the same time He was saying, essentially, I am God, okay? He, at the same time, lived in humble service to people to the point that He laid down His life and died for people. One thing I notice about a lot of relativistic people in our culture is that they care, sometimes passionately, about the poor, about the disadvantaged, about the minority, about the immigrant, about the pushed down and marginalized of our society. Oftentimes, those with a relativist worldview really care about those people. And if that describes you, I just want you to know that Jesus shares your concern, that Jesus was passionate about those kind of people as you are. Yes, Jesus believed that there was absolute truth. And Jesus believed that that absolute truth was God. It was Himself. But at the same time, It seems crazy. At the same time, he showed and taught love for the lost and unbelieving. He promoted nonviolent protest to power and humble service to all people, even those who hurt him. See, the way our culture sees it is you either are exclusive, narrow, arrogant, and at war with the world, or you are inclusive, relativistic, accepting of all beliefs, believe everything, all religions go to the same place, teach ultimately the same thing, the golden rule, being honest, being nice, everything kind of does the same thing, and it's all good. You either are exclusive and ugly and mean and proud, and arrogant, or you are inclusive and believe that all things go to the same place. It doesn't really matter. Your truth can be my truth, or it can be your truth, or whatever you believe. That's the way our society views it. You're either exclusive or you're inclusive. And Jesus not only brought those two together, but to Jesus, those two things were inseparable. The care for the poor, the care for the marginalized, the care for the lost, the care for the hurting, and the belief that there really is one way to God. There is an absolute truth, there is an absolute God, and there is a way to Him, and that way is through Jesus. Jesus brought those two things together. Belief in the God revealed by Jesus compels us to love other faiths, even relativism. It compels us to love, it compels us to love people of other faiths. It doesn't compel us to believe that other faiths are correct, but it compels us to love people of other faiths. It compels us to love people of other political beliefs. It compels us to love people of all kinds and to seek to understand them. Now, does belief in the God that is revealed by Jesus, does it compel us to save souls? Yes. It compels us to reach out and try to rescue others who need to be brought to God through Jesus. But not in an arrogant way. Not in a, hey, I'm on the winning team and you better get on the winning team or you're in trouble. Not in a puffed up sort of way, but simply, Jesus has loved me, and that love compels me to love you and to share that love with you and to offer that love to you. Yes, religion, including atheistic religions. We'll talk a little bit more about the atheist aspect in particular later on. All religions naturally lead people to feel superior, ultimately war against those who disagree with them. That's the natural course of things. And yes, many Christians in the Christian religion, do this. It sickens me, and I'm sure it sickens you, whatever side you're on, that Christians would involve themselves in that sort of arrogant, putting themselves above other people, when that is just anti-Christian, as it is against the way of Jesus. When Christians do this, they're not following Jesus, but their own sinful, selfish desires. True Christianity believes that Jesus is the one way to God and believes in unconditional love for all people, whatever their belief, whatever their practice. So, if you're listening to this message, whether you're right here now or you're listening to it online or whatever, and you tend toward more of a relativistic view of reality, view of truth, I just want to invite you to just entertain the thought that there might be an absolute truth, that there might be an absolute reality. To just entertain that thought, to think about, to wonder about that, to kind of investigate how well relativism will really work in real life. And even if the thought of Jesus being that absolute truth is just repulsive to you, it's just strange and repulsive to you, I just want to encourage you to investigate it, okay? Just to look into it, to investigate it more deeply. This Wednesday at 6:30, we're going to try to kind of discuss this can of worms that I've opened now. And I just encourage you to come and be a part of that discussion. But I also want to encourage you to go to the source, okay? If you're more of a relativistic person, and, a skeptic as far as Christianity and maybe all religions go, would you do something? Would you go and find you a Bible? You can find it on your phone now, okay? You can find your Bible, find it on your phone, and I encourage you to use a modern translation. You might have like an old King James version at home that your grandma gave you or something like that. Blow off the dust and look at that. You're not going to understand that very well, or maybe you're an extremely smart person, you can figure it out, but it's just a lot more work, okay? It was translated in 1611. We don't talk like that anymore. So I just encourage you to find a more modern translation, NIV, NLT, something like that. And read through the Gospel of John this week. The Gospel of John. John was one of Jesus' apostles. And for years, critical scholars thought John must have been written like 200 or 300 years after Jesus, because it needed time for legend to develop. It couldn't have actually been written by the Apostle John. And then they started finding early stuff. They found a fragment of the Gospel of John that's dated as early as like 90. And it just showed that it's distributed widely by the end of the first century. So it really was written early. These were written by people who were alive during the time that Jesus was actually on the earth, where what they said could be disproven because there were people around who actually saw what happened and they could say, no, that's not the way it happened. But John wrote to people who were believers, but he also wrote to people who were skeptics, who struggled with belief. And I just want to encourage you to read that this week. Just look at it. If you're a relativist, if you are anti-Christian, that's okay. You don't have to believe it, okay? There's a lot of things that we read that we don't believe, okay? You don't have to believe it. I just want to encourage you to read it, to look at it, and to see these radical claims that Jesus made, and just to see for yourself, just to get a little bit first-hand feel of this Jesus who began this Christian movement. And if you are a Christian already, I want to encourage you to do the same thing. A lot of us grew up in sort of a quasi-Christian culture, okay? Maybe we grew up in a family that went to church, or at least that we were surrounded by people that went to church, and we think we know about this Jesus character. We've been to Sunday school and all that thing. We think we know about Jesus and all that stuff. But when we actually look at the records of Jesus being on earth, we really don't. A lot of us, we really don't know about Jesus. When we actually read what he did and read what he said, it's different. It's different than that Sunday school thing that we were taught. So I just want to encourage you this week to go and start reading through the Gospel of John. Now, it starts off kind of esoteric. It's kind of weird the way it starts off because he's kind of laying down the themes of the book. But just hang with it. It gets to the story. It gets easier. And read through that Gospel this week. And join us in this conversation as we look for that which is true. Would you pray with me? Dear Father, there are probably some with us, God, that when I say pray with me, that seems awkward because we're not necessarily sure that you're there. But God, those of us who do believe in you, we seek to know you, and those of us who maybe don't believe in you have a desire for truth. Would you reveal that to us? Would you help us in our search as we seek for that which is real, as we seek for that which is true? Because it's not easy. And God, we got a lot of voices around us that tell us different things, including this voice that we're hearing right now, that are telling us different things and challenging us in different ways. And God, if you're there, you're truth, and we want to know you. and we want to belong to you. And we want our lives to be what you created them to be. And we don't want to live our lives just getting through life without a clue, without an understanding of what matters, what our purpose is. God, so many of us, we live this life and we go to our jobs and we raise our families if we've got a family. We do our marriage if we've got a marriage. We try to get some money and get some things if we can. But we don't have a purpose. We don't know why we're here. And so I'm praying for us to know why we're here and to have purpose and to have life. God, we pray for that. We thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. I hope you have a great week. I hope you have a blessed week. Seriously, if we've brought up topics that you'd like to talk about, I'd love to talk. I'd love to talk one-on-one with you and just discuss things. I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything, but to explore those things, I'd love to. And I encourage you to come Wednesday as we discuss those things together. You're dismissed.